Welcome. Just waiting for people to join before we kick off, but it's always that moment where everybody's here. We don't want to start, but welcome to those who are joining.
That's why you need the hold music.
I know, I do.
Yeah. Need some good lift music or something.
Anyone play the piano?
Oh, absolutely. I won't sing. It's not on a Monday night. Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to our fireside chat, a virtual fireside chat this evening. It's cold winter January evening actually it's been a bit better today. It hasn't been as Arctic, but I hope everyone's stayed safe after the storm last night. And I'm really excited about this evening. My name's Holly. I work for Fertility. We are the UK's first virtual fertility clinic, and we specialise in all things fertility, IVF, egg freezing, but also particularly in egg donation. So we find and match egg donors with women, families, individuals, couples, same-sex couples, anyone who needs donor eggs. That's one of the main things that we specialize in. And we've worked with Becky, who I'm joined with tonight, for many years. And we're really excited to have Becky join us. She's going to be having a really great conversation this evening with Keely, who is also here. Thank you, Keely, for joining us. And also Sam is also joining, sharing her story. Thank you, Sam. And we're joined by Debs, who is one of our senior fertility nurses at Apricity. She's going to start off by giving us a little brief overview of what we offer and what our egg donation service is. And then after that, after a couple of minutes, we'll set off with the reason why I'm sure everybody's here to hear from Keely and Sam and Becky. So if you have questions throughout, please put them in probably into the Q&A box, wherever, either one. We will probably, I'm not sure, Becky, if you want to do questions as we go along or probably at the end. And if you have clinical questions that you'd like Debs to answer, Debs is going to keep an eye on the question box as well, and she can answer as we go along. So yeah, if you have any questions, please do, don't hold back. So yeah, Debs, I will, if I've got a few prompts for you, just so
amazing. Cool, thank you.
Yeah. So I'll share my screen. We've gone through this bit already, that we're joined Becky, Keely, Debs and Sam. So Debs, over to you. If you'd like to give us a little bit of an overview about what we offer at Apricity, just so everybody here is aware of why we're here and why we're hosting this webinar and why this conversation is, relevant to us.
Absolutely. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining. As Holly mentioned, we're the UK's first virtual fertility clinic, and I know this slide doesn't really focus on that, but I just wanted to talk through, obviously we don't have a physical base, but how we work just like a normal fertility clinic, but partnering with different clinics and ultrasound clinics as well, all across the UK. And our aim really is to streamline the fertility process, whatever journey that is, whether it's just diagnostics, IVF with your own eggs, IVF with donor eggs, finding a donor. We're really just trying to streamline that service for you and minimize the number of trips that you have to go into a physical fertility clinic. So in terms of donation in the UK, that's one of the areas where we really pride ourselves on. So all of our donors are based in the UK, and that means that we have to adhere to the HFEA, which are the governing body for fertility treatments in the UK, and they also regulate and put in guidelines for all donation treatments within the UK as well. So because all of our donors are UK based, that means that you don't have to travel abroad to find a donor. As I mentioned previously, the HFA put in regulations with regards to protecting the donors as well. So in the UK, children who are born as a result of egg or sperm donation have the right to find out identifying information about their donors after the age of 18. So that means that if you are having recipient treatment, you don't get to find out who your donor is. You get to find out anonymous information about them to help you decide if they're the right donor for you. But the child has a right to know. So after the age of 18, they can contact the HFEA and find out the donor's full name, their date of birth, and their last known address. All donors are asked to keep the HFEA and their clinic up to date with their personal information. So if they change address, then that gets updated as well. I think it's really important, just to touch on it too much, I don't want to bore you with guidelines and regulations, but I think it's a really important part of like finding an egg donor or considering egg donor treatment, is that the donor has no legal, parental or any responsibility over any children born as a result of their donation. They have no obligation to return any contact if a child does make contact, but that's kind of how it works on both sides. In terms of how we work, we're not an egg bank as such. We really pride ourselves on more of a bespoke matching service. So as you can tell, I like to chat. So I like to chat to recipients and donors and really get a feel for who you are as people, what you're looking for, like reasons for donating, but also then reasons for like seeking egg donation treatment, and what characteristics and traits you're looking for. So the main things that we can help guide you on would be obviously like physical characteristics, ethnicity, skin tone, height, hair color, eye color. But then we also take into consideration like your hobbies, interests, what you do for a job, and those kind of things really, and what values are important to you. As part of that as well, I think Holly mentioned that we are a tech-based company, but our matching is really humanistic. So we're not just talking about, okay, you're looking for a donor who has brown hair and brown eyes. It's humans who do the matching process. So we're looking at facial features. So if there's a resemblance with like eye shape and face shape and those kind of things as well. As part of the matching, obviously with anonymity, you're not allowed to see who your donor is, but we do offer 2 childhood photos of your donor. So you can get an idea of what they look like as children. Generally they're of the donor when they were under the age of 6 years old, just to protect their identity. I guess once you've been matched as part of that process, then you have a dedicated advisor. So it's a fertility advisor who's available for you 7 days a week for extended hours. So that's Monday through to Sunday, 7 days a week, early in the morning till like 9 p.m. at night. So you've always got someone on hand who can help you. Thanks, Holly. That slide's really helpful. So yeah, the advisors are there for you 7 days a week. They offer emotional support, guidance with your treatment, if you have just any of those niggly questions. And they can also directly liaise with like a fertility nurse or the consultant as well, who's managing your care as well. So rather than having to phone up and leave a message, we've got instant messaging. We can hop on a video call with you without any delay. So our pride again is like you're feeling really supported throughout the journey, and you've always got someone you can go to just at the end of a message, or like quick call, or send an app chat, whatever works best for you. Can we go back to the previous slide, Holly? Perfect. Yeah. So I just wanted to touch on like the guidelines again around donors. So all donors in the UK have to be aged between 19 and complete their egg collection before their 36th birthday. They have to complete family medical checks, their own medical checks, genetic screening, and have certain like results for their own fertility as well. They have to have a BMI under a certain range, not be smoking, or be smoke-free for a certain time frame as well. And all donors, it is the law that donors aren't paid, so they have to donate altruistically. However, they are reimbursed for their time. I don't know if anyone's been through an IVF cycle. It's not the nicest thing to do, and it's quite time intense, and it does take over for a few weeks, if not more. So all donors receive £750 compensation for their donation. So it's not allowed to be more than that. It's not allowed to be less than that. I think it's really key as well that the donors don't get paid until that last appointment, so on the day of the egg collection. And so that's actually usually about 3 to 4 months down the line from their initial inquiry. So that's certainly kind of, I hope that reinforces the fact that our donors are really genuinely just wanting to help other people. It's certainly not like a quick money maker or anything like that. It's a very long process. So yeah, I think we've talked about most things about the HFEA, so keeping treatment safe for recipients and donors, altruistic, the matching side of things. We do offer 2 different packages. So at the moment we're offering fresh eggs. So we can have a fresh 8-egg package, which is where you get 8 eggs from your donor, or we have a 1-to-1 package, which gets you all of the eggs from your donor. So our donors tend to get an average of between around 16 to 18 eggs collected. There's various prices with the packages. So the 8-egg package is £13,000 and the 1-to-1 package is £16,000. And then we have a different package as well for couples who need to use surrogacy with an egg donor as well.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Debs.
No worries.
Deb's is going to stick around for the rest of the evening, and she'll be in the Q&A. I have been alerted to the fact that apparently the chat is disabled. I'm not sure why, but the Q&A is working fine. So if you have questions, put them in the Q&A, not in the chat. Debs, I think there is one in there that you may want to take a look at anyway. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Becky, and I'm really looking forward to hearing this. I hope everyone enjoys it. Thank you.
So thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Fertility for hosting tonight, because what we really want to get out of tonight is for you to have that understanding of the practical side of things, as Debs has just gone through, but also to understand the personal side of egg donation. And I'm delighted to be joined by Keely and Sam, who both have their own experience, as do I. So one of the things I want to do is try and keep this quite interactive. So I know the chat's not working, but if you do have a question as we're talking, pop it in the Q&A and I'll keep trying to keep an eye on it so we can cover off anything you'd like to know. We've only got 45 minutes and I know we can talk, especially Keely and I. So we're going to try and stick to the point. But just as a way of introduction, if you don't know me, my name is Becky Kearns. I'm also known on Instagram as Defining Mum. And I have been sharing my story for the last 5 years. I became a mum through egg donation back in 2016. So I had a diagnosis of POI, went through multiple rounds with my own eggs, which didn't work. And then we used an egg donor. And I now have 3 amazing girls. So Mina is 7 and Eska and Lena are 5. And I just feel that it's really important that we share these stories, because I always love the phrase that shame dies when stories are told in safe spaces. And back when I was going through my own journey, I couldn't really find anyone that I could really connect with about all of the different things that were going through my head, not just the practical side of going through treatment, but the fears, the emotions, and the worries about what I might feel or how I might feel. So I think that's really where we want to get to with this chat tonight. So Keely, I'm going to come to you first, just to give a bit of a real summary of your journey to where you are today, and then I'll come over to you, Sam.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. It's always quite difficult to do a summary, isn't it? I should be better at this by now. So I am Keely. I am trying to be a mum on Instagram, and I, like Becky, have been sharing my story for a long time before I even made the decision to go down the donor path. I'll do a very short plotted history. My husband and I started trying to have a baby when I was 34. I think it was 34. And we went to the GP and got diagnosed with the beautiful gamut of unexplained infertility. So we were sent off for tests. A very long story short, we decided to go privately for our IVF treatment. The NHS waiting list was just too long, unfortunately, in my approaching years. And we really wanted to make our family. So we actually ended up having 8 rounds of IVF with my own eggs, 6 fresh transfers. And by sort of round 4, it was quite evident that my eggs were not quite cutting it. And so we started to kind of think about that process of egg donation then. And I'd already, through Instagram, started looking for conversations with people. I found Becky, and we went through a few more rounds and then decided that really the way that we were going to make our family was through egg donation. Obviously, there's a lot that comes with that at the same time, so I'm not just glossing over it. But in terms of how we got to where we are, and then we did a round of egg donation. We actually did ours abroad, just so you say. And we were very fortunate in that first time it worked. And we are now the very proud parents of a very cute little boy called Freddie, who's now 3.5, and running circles around us, but in a very cute way.
Thank you, Keely. And I still remember, like, we were having conversation. I think we had our first glass of wine together when you were considering going down the donor route, and we were talking about all these things. And it's been amazing to kind of watch you come through that and then go through the cycle and the pregnancy and now meet Freddie. So yeah, it's just been wonderful. And to have other people that you know who have been through this, I think is so important as well. Sam, how about you? What's your experience?
So my story is actually quite similar to both yours, Becky, and to Keely's as well. So similar situation for myself. Myself and my husband were trying to conceive probably for quite some time. Probably around about the age of 33, we kind of decided actually that we're not getting anywhere. Similar situation to Keely, went to GP, had a bunch of tests done. And yeah, the good old diagnosis of no diagnosis that a lot of people get, right, which is the whole unexplained infertility, which is both kind of frustrating but not frustrating, because you sort of frustrating you don't have an answer, but frustrating in the sense that you don't have one. So it's a bit of a weird situation. And yeah, because I was very much at the point then closely approaching my 35th birthday by the time we'd done all the rounds of testing and seen the consultant. Yeah, we literally had about 15 minutes at our appointment with our consultant to decide whether we were going to go for IVF or not, just because of funding in the area that I live in. So we did that, and very similar to yourself, Keely, kind of had ended up doing 5 rounds of IVF, but by the 3rd round we just kind of, it just wasn't working. My ovaries had kind of given up the ghost and just weren't responding to the treatment, and we weren't getting a good amount of eggs on each cycle. So we were kind of given that sort of devastating kind of blow of news, which was, do you want to kind of continue and keep trying, or do you want to kind of consider your options, which really for us at that point was either egg donation or adoption, and we'd already ruled out as a couple quite early on in our process that we kind of probably didn't want to go down the adoption route. It just wasn't for us. Absolutely commend people that do that, but it just wasn't for us. So I took about 6 months out from having treatment at that point, just because it was quite a hard pill to swallow at that point. So I was just like, okay, like, what do we do? And also kind of just reset and look at our options, much like you clearly looked at kind of going abroad, looked at here in the UK, and just tried to weigh up kind of costs and stress of kind of traveling and all the different things that kind of come with it, as you say. And in the end, yeah, we decided to go down the egg donation route, and we're extremely lucky, and will be forever grateful to our donor, whoever she may be, that yeah, eventually we are now kind of proud parents to a little girl, Robin, who will be 3 in March. So I feel your pain, Keely, about kind of children running rings round, because we're in that similar, like,
I'm past that stage.
Yeah, we're kind
Still
of
run rings.
Teenager kind of stage. So yeah, she's a joy, but she's also a handful too at times. But yeah, that for us, we were super lucky. We hit it at a point where COVID was happening as well, so that was quite tricky. But yeah, kind of coming to do the 5th round of treatment, and yeah, first embryo from our egg donor, and yeah, here she is. So
amazing. So there's quite a few parallels, I think, between all of our stories, and I'm always aware when I'm talking about my own story in particular that you kind of summarize such a long period of time and such a long process in like a nutshell, don't you? And it makes it seem, you might be listening to this thinking, oh, that sounds like they got their head around it was really easy. But I know in my case, it wasn't just a quick, oh, yes, okay, we'll move down that route. It was a real grieving process. I had to really process what it meant. And it was actually connecting and hearing other stories that opened me up to the idea of, okay, using someone else's eggs to have a child, and how might that feel? And so I want to talk a little bit now about that kind of decision process for you. We have had a question as well, so I almost want you to kind of bear this in mind as we're talking. So how did you navigate switching from IVF to egg donation? I'm struggling, feeling like this will give my kid a tough start in life, that they'll feel lost. I don't want to feel selfish or like I'm messing them up. And like, you're already caring for your child now, like you're here, you're listening, you're trying to find things out. And I'm sure we've all got an answer to this. Keely, if I come to you first, just in terms of how did you navigate that switch from IVF to donor eggs?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I think some parts of it if I'm really honest, you sort of block out. It's a bit like childbirth itself, because it's like self-preservation. But I think a lot of it for me, I think the thing to say is, obviously we're talking sometimes very generally about experiences about egg donation. Obviously we're talking personally about ours today, and it doesn't, like Becky says, want to come across as kind of flippant or that was easy. But from my experience, I think because from the very start of my journey, I always knew it was going to be tricky. Like my ovarian reserve was low. Even my first round, like I never collected. I think like my bonus bonanza was like 8 eggs one round or something. But literally, and then as the rounds went on, it was like 2 or 3 or 1 or 2, or like it was such low numbers. So we were always on the back foot a little bit. And I think, to be honest, for me, as we started to go through those rounds, and without sounding like totally negative, but like you were kind of setting yourself up for a bit of disappointment every time. That's the way that you kind of managed your expectations of not getting too ahead of yourself, but then like, oh, well, it probably won't work anyway, so let's just have another go. Or like, and I think in a way, I started grieving before I totally recognized that I was doing it, if you know what I mean. So I think every time I knew that the chances were just dropping and dropping and dropping, and they weren't very good to start with. So I think in a way, even though I wasn't really conscious of it at the time, like I didn't know I didn't know grieving your genetic loss was a term. I didn't know that was, but I kind of was. And so actually, without realizing it, when the consultant said to me a bit of a similar thing, like, you can crack on and keep doing this as long as you can got money, as long as you can financially and emotionally prepare yourself to do it. But really, I think you should start to consider a different path, and that egg donation would work really well for you. And I was ready because I think I'd already, and again, because it's all happening to you, and it's that kind of thing. Whereas John, my husband, wasn't quite there yet. It was like, oh no, I've been concentrating on this. Like, this is enough for me to get my head round. I've got to now shift. And I was like, well, you should start thinking about it, because I'm happy to continue. But, it was more like a ticking off boxes. It was literally like a checklist of like, right, we've done this test, we've done that test, we've done. And then I think when we started to look at kind of trying to batch eggs to try and get a good one to transfer back into me, and it was just so abysmal. And they went off and been tested, and they were just abnormal. It suddenly, I think for both of us at that point, like it all just like the penny dropped, and it was like, okay, well, this explains everything.
Yeah, it's like a slow realization, isn't it? That actually, is this going to work? And if not, then what? And yeah, I always say it was that moment where I probably stopped thinking more about what I was losing and started to think more about what I could gain from going down this route. And actually, when I started thinking logically about the statistics and actually, what is it I want from this? I want to be a mum. I want to do all the things that a mother does. I want to raise a child. I want to love a child. And actually, does this give me that? Well, yes, it does. Not in the way I always thought, but it opened my eyes up. And I think very similar to you, each time you kind of get the disappointment, and then you go, oh, right. But each time, I think in a way I was expecting it more, that it wouldn't work. And then maybe that was part of the process.
And then I think when I switched, and when you actually kind of think about it, and Sam, I don't know if you felt this as well, like, and again, like, stats are so crazy. Like, they're so good. Like, we always joke about this, and I know I've used this line so many times before, but like, literally, I think when I started, there was like a 9% chance it might work. And that drastically went down to about like 3 or something, I think, by my last round of batching. And it was like, if you went into any other situation and you said there's a 97% chance this isn't going to work, you'd be like, well, all right, you're mental. I'm not going to do that. Like, this is crazy. And then when you look at the donation stats and you're like, oh my God, this is off the chart. It's not 100%, it's not 90%, it's not. But I was like, but it's more likely than not. So, and that for me was really hard to get my head around. The fact that I could actually be pregnant, whether it was with my own genetics or not, that for me actually was the biggest thing to get. It kind of being whether it was an egg donor or not was kind of by the by. It was more about the fact that I could actually be pregnant. Like I'd been pregnant once before, and we'd had a miscarriage at 8.5 weeks. It's like I'd never experienced that before. We'd never got to a positive test through IVF. So that for me was more of a thing than almost like the donor conversation, because it was trying to imagine yourself pregnant is really hard when you've never been anywhere near it. So I think Sam, I don't know how you.
I was going to come to you, Sam.
Similar situation, and touching on what you said earlier on, Becky, actually, about kind of like grief. It's a real kind of, for me, it was a real grieving process to kind of switch from, right, I'm going to kind of do this all with that. And actually kind of now I kind of laugh about it with myself and with my husband, where we sort of often chuckle about it, where we probably just very naively kind of walked into our first cycle of IVF thinking, no, this is it, this is our best child, but this is going to work. And it, you kind of, for us, it was, and we were lucky with that cycle. It did work. We did get a positive pregnancy test, but much like yourself, Keely, we ended up at about 10 and a half weeks, and that baby, it wasn't a viable pregnancy, and we lost it, unfortunately. But it just you kind of keep going, because you feel like you get so close at times, and so that's kind of sometimes the bit that kind of spurs you on and keeps you going. But like you say, and I'm quite a logical and quite an analytical person, and I do look at things like statistics and research and all of that stuff out there, as we all do, right? It's a huge, it's something we're heavily invested in, both emotionally and financially as well. And so I think, for me, it was like you say, when you start looking at the odds, if it was anything else, when the odds are stacked against you, you kind of go, no, I'm not going to do that, that's mad, why would I do it? But like you say, it's the outcome. You're thinking about what you want from that. And for me, it was very much about, I sort of mentioned as we kind of like we're just sort of doing our opening piece, but I kind of mentioned that for me it was very much like that grieving process. I had to take 6 months away from the whole process and being involved in that to really wrap my head around, what does this now mean for us, and what does that look like? And I kind of that real sort of like grief of kind of saying goodbye to being able to have a child that was genetically attached to me. And connected to me, and I think that bit was really, really hard for me. I come from quite a strong family background, and so that was really everything for me. So it was really hard, that bit for me to kind of let go of. But again, my typical analytical, logical brain is like, right, let's do like loads of research. There's got to be a way around this. And I did so much research, and this was part of the reason why we considered kind of doing treatment abroad. But some of the research I kind of stumbled upon really kind of talked about like, different kind of like, multiple lines of DNA and all of those kind of things. And I did lots of like research into kind of like groups and communities, and spoke to other people that had kind of gone through the, the egg donation process, and just sort of said, you really, as mad as it sounds, you really kind of don't care. Once you're pregnant and you're carrying that child, you kind of don't actually really care like how it got there, and how that all came about, because actually, as you say, it's really then focusing on that journey of kind of being a mum and raising your child and loving them. And it's kind of it's almost sort of like that, that piece becomes irrelevant, because they are still attached to you. You grow them for 9 months, and you kind of you give them their lifeline, their bloodline. So and like my daughter couldn't look anything more like my husband if she tried. So it's that in itself, and that's quite.
Freddie does like John. It's like, I don't know what I was even worried about. It's like it was never going to look like me anyway.
Exactly, right. And I think this is it, isn't it? You kind of go, do you know what? Actually, as long as that like they look like one of us, because that's always going to be the case, whether it's like this way or like what people like to refer to as the traditional way. It really doesn't matter. Your child is going to look like one of you. So like for me, she's totally mine now, and in some respects I feel quite proud about how she's here, and the journey we went on to kind of be there, because there were a lot of people that actually It's part of the reason why we all share our story, right? You know, it's to give people that hope. A lot of people get to a stage where you kind of like, you give up hope, and you give up, and you feel like actually like everything's against you. But actually, for me, this was the biggest line of hope that we could have ever had. And yeah, and that's why I think it's such an important story to share with people, because you kind of don't want people to give up, right?
I think it's really important to recognise as well. Like, I know Becky mentioned it at the beginning, and I think Holly touched on it as well, is like, and it's kind of reference to that very first question. I've seen like a load more come through, but like, what you're doing now, like, it's really tough, because if you were having a baby naturally, you would not even be asking questions of yourself in any way, of any like, can I do this? Would I be able to do this? Like, it would just happen, and you'd just be pregnant and have a baby, and blah, blah, blah. It was like, but because you're worrying about this stuff, and you're worrying about your reactions and their feelings and people around you's feelings, and like, you're already like a pretty decent parent, like. And I think it's really, I certainly didn't, when I was making the decision, give myself enough credit for that. And I think that in turn, once you start kind of giving yourself some props, the struggle becomes less so, because you actually have a bit more confidence in yourself, and a bit more, you know, a bit more faith in, and I use that term very loosely, but like, a bit more faith in the kind of courage of your convictions. Like, I'm throwing out all the cliches here. And I don't, like, to be really direct in answering the question, like, it's very easy to, everything is very easy to say, but you are already setting your child up to have a brilliant start to their life by considering all of these things and having these conversations, and arming yourself with all of this information and listening to these stories. And even if you'd had a biological child of your own, they still might be messed up. Like, they still might be selfish, you know, they still might not like you at some point in their lives. Like, that's what being a parent is about. That's not about being a biological parent.
I think there's some work that I've kind of done is always like just switching the narrative around this as well. And I always, this is how I kind of talk to our girls about it, in terms of, mummy couldn't make you with her eggs, but mummy made you with her heart. And I think that really gets across that actually there is so much heart that goes into, and love that goes into making this decision. And it's understanding, yes, I couldn't make them with my eggs, but equally without me, they also wouldn't be here as well. And I think, I really don't think that using donor conception, using egg donation, whether it's double donation, gives them an automatic tough start in life. There are so many things that can mean you have a tough start in life. I do think that it provides certain challenges for us as a parent that we need to prepare ourselves for, and be open to. But we're already asking these questions now. We're already doing this work. And this is why I created Paths to Parent Hub, which, if you're kind of listening to this and you want to delve deeper into some of these topics, there's so many different webinars with professionals and conversations around these different questions and feelings that you might have. And it's a great way of being able to almost prepare yourself. But I think the starting point has to be that we know that there are things we need to acknowledge on this journey, the fact that we don't share genetics, and that they might have questions, and there is you're kind of welcoming in a third or person into this, or a fourth person if you're using double donation. And so you've really got to think through these things. But equally, it's sometimes pulling yourself away from those really difficult questions and going, actually, what's that day-to-day going to look like? Because I mean, I want to come to both of you and kind of go, what's that relationship with your children now? What's the day-to-day? Because I certainly don't think about this every single day. We are just kind of your regular family on the school run, trying to remember all the clubs and the birthday parties and everything else, that actually, although it consumed me at the time, now it's a part of us, it's part of our story, but it definitely doesn't define us. So I mean, Sam, for you, I mean, does it cross your mind often?
That. I would absolutely 100% agree with that. I don't think it defines you. I think it defines you in a way where you there are tools that you probably teach your children which that you may not, which is kind of things like being more resilient, right? We're super resilient, like the journey that you go on to kind of get to that point. So I think, and I look at my daughter now and I just think on a daily basis, like, the resilience that she has, like how bright she is, how she just kind of gets up and gets on with things and like brushes herself off and like, like I don't ever compare like children to children, but when you see her in a group, she's kind of like the one that's there, and she's sort of leading everybody like around her, and she's like and it's just really lovely to kind of watch her like grow. And for me, that's probably been the most pleasurable thing at the whole experience, is kind of getting to that point and being able to watch her grow and become her own person. But to be able to see certain traits in her that are really from how we've got to that point. But like you say, on a day-to-day basis, we don't think about that. Yes, it was our journey and how we got there, but we don't it doesn't define who we are and what we do on a daily basis. We like every regular family, like get up and it's like, come on, we're late, get this, we need to get that, let's get this, we've got to get out the door, and and trying to remember 101 million things. But equally the relationship between us, I feel like our bond is really strong, and she often like almost leads me to tears when I sit and think about it and reflect on it, where she just kind of looks at me and goes, Mummy, you're my best friend, and things like that. Just the words you never thought you would ever hear. And it's at those points, those reflection points, when you kind of hear your kids say things like that, which you never thought that you might hear, is really, that's it for me, I think, is the bit that kind of then starts to define like how you kind of got to that point, right? So but on a day-to-day basis, you just you kind of get up and do it, right?
You do. And Keely, for you, is it like, does that resonate with you?
Yeah, totally. I think it's that whole thing of like, we changed our path and we used an egg donor. People asked me right at the beginning as well, because also for those of you who haven't been through it yet, or been through the process of having a biological child either, it's really difficult sometimes because no one has anything else to say about a baby apart from what they look like. So society has built this weird dialogue. It's like, oh, it looks so much like you. It's like, it doesn't look anything like anyone. It's just a baby. Like, it's just like, it can't talk. It doesn't have like, it hasn't formed a personality yet. So, and really, I joked about this. I think I did like a Instaloa webinar, like when Freddie was about 5 months old. I'm literally just worrying about whether he's pants or not. Like, do I have to change another nappy? Blah, blah, blah. I'm not changing it going, oh, you're my donor baby. Like, da, da, da. Like it is. And again, it's not being flippant. It's just that it doesn't, at that point, at that moment, it doesn't matter. It's a baby. It's your baby. You're changing their nappy. They're reliant on you. They need you and everything that you stand for. So I think exactly the same. And I think also, the challenge of being donor parents is that there will continuously be a slightly different dynamic to the challenges that you come across as your child gets older. But it doesn't mean that parents with biological children don't have the same challenges. It's just that there's a slightly different dynamic involved in ours. And I actually think what potentially our experience has made, and I defy anyone who has been through any sort of fertility treatment not to acknowledge that what it has given them, even it may not have been a baby, it's like a huge amount of empathy and emotional intelligence that even if you didn't have it before, like, you've definitely got it now. Because and I feel like we do reflect that on Freddie, because we're very, don't get me wrong, he can be a right little pain in the bum, and he can be not very kind to other people and does not keep his hands to himself. But most of the time, he really does. And he's like, oh, I knew that I had to play with everyone today, Mummy, because that's what you said. And, and it is because you know the terms that you should use, or that actually you don't know what else is going on in other people's lives. And I think having that reflected back on you is really important. But yeah, sometimes he'll like go through phases of like, he'll pick up this one donor storybook, and we read that for literally 2 weeks straight. Like he is allowed 3 books in the evening, and he chooses 3 books, and we read those, and that was 2 weeks straight. And then he hasn't touched it for like 6 weeks. But he knows the story and he knows the word, and he'll like, so, and then it's only then really that I reflect on it, because I'm like, we're telling our story, and it's really important. And even before, like, we were having our dinner just before now, and I said, well, Daddy's going to put you to bed tonight, so we're going to this phase where only wants me to put him to bed. It's really painful.
I feel your pain there, Keely.
I mean, it's gorgeous, and I don't want to wish it away, but equally, you know. And I said, Daddy's going to put you to bed because Mummy's going to go and talk to some people about making a family with a donor like you, with a donor egg. And he was like, oh, yeah, donor. And it doesn't matter whether he understands it or not. It's just that I've said the word, and he's like, oh, that's nice, Mummy. Or, but the bond is like ridiculous. Like I had I mean, you know, this was just last night. I was falling asleep with him, and he literally put his hand on my face and went, Mummy, you're perfect.
It's just those little moments, isn't it, where you're just like, oh, like it's everything that you've always dreamed about, and you would not change it. And that's the thing. I was like, at the beginning, I felt like the unluckiest person for having to consider this, and now I feel like the luckiest person in the world, because I got them, and that they are what came from this whole process. And yeah, it makes it all worthwhile, doesn't it? And I'm really conscious we've got some other questions that I want to kind of touch on as we're going through this, so that we've covered everybody's questions, and we've touched a little bit on similarities. And I think we've all said that our kind of children do resemble our partners, and you've just said there, Keely, that when you've got a baby in particular, resemblance talk is really, really common. And we've actually got a webinar on Paths to Parenthood all about navigating resemblance talk. But this person has asked, do you care that the baby does not look like you? I know that skin colour, hair colour may be similar, but features won't be a worry. What if I don't like what the baby looks like? And I remember having this fear when I was pregnant of like, oh gosh, what if they come up with a really distinct feature that isn't obviously part of Matt's family line or mine? And I felt really shallow for thinking it, but I was like, what if? And I suppose it was like kind of waiting to meet a little stranger. But I suppose you're like that anyway, whether or not you've used a donor. But I think the donor bit amplifies that. But it's just one of the things, I think over time, I think I saw the similarities with Matt, but now I've got a 7-year-old and 2 nearly 6-year-olds, and the whole resemblance thing has really taken a back seat, because they've actually picked up, and I think it's worth bearing in mind, as they grow, they pick up mannerisms from you, they pick up the ways of doing things, the way they say things, little things about their sense of humor, and actually they start to behave in ways like you, and that makes them resemble you, but just in a very different way. And I think it's broadening this sense of what resemblance means. And actually, I love them for their individuality as well. And I love the differences about them. And they've got these beautiful curls, which don't come from that side of the family. They must come from the donor side. And you start to think that at the very beginning, if someone would have said to me, my child would have a real distinct feature that quite obviously must come from the donor, that would have scared me, because I'd have thought, oh, it's going to be a constant reminder. But actually, it's just a part of them, and it's a wonderful part of them. And we celebrate that as we celebrate any similarities that they have. And I don't know, have you come across that at all, Sam? I think I'm going to try and be brief on these answers, if that's all right. I say that having just done a monologue. But
I completely agree. I think, like, for me, she came out, she looked just like my husband, so I was like, oh my god, I've literally given birth to Al. It's quite scary. Like, same nose, everything. But as you say, as she's grown, they change, like, through different periods and different courses throughout their life, so that they do change. And you're right, now she's a real great mix of both of us, from like personality, like her mannerisms, like some of the things that she comes out with, but equally, when I look at her, she looks like, when she's right next to my husband, yes, she looks like him, but when otherwise, I kind of don't look at her and think she looks like either of us. But she has the most incredible, beautiful blue eyes with the most amazing long eyelashes and beautiful blonde hair. And I hope you hold on to those, because I think those are the things that, as you say, probably clearly came from her donor. And I think amazing, you know, because that's, you know, forever I will be grateful to that person. And I kind of want Robin to be exactly the same way. I want her to grow up being grateful as well. So yeah, but I think for me it's actually quite nice that there's a part of somebody else in there too, so that got us to that point.
And I always think the phrase "they look like themselves" is a really good one to use, because that's so true. And if you need to deflect anything, well, they look like themselves, and they do.
We're all individual people, right? So yeah, absolutely.
They do. But equally, I know you, Keely. I've known Freddie since he was a little baby, and I know you said earlier he doesn't look like me, but I definitely, when I see photos of you
No, you're
next to
so
Freddie,
funny, Becky.
I can see these like little similarities in that, and it's just like the way he smiles, and so I do think people will pick up on those things as well. They see you together, they see the relationship, they see that side of things.
Totally. And I always love you for it. I always say to people, well, someone who does think that Freddie looks nice, and she's got 3 donor children, so it's not like she's just saying it to make me feel better. But no, he does. And I think that's the whole, like you were saying, Sam, it's the whole nurture versus nature, right? So yes, there's things that categorically will be different because it is not your genetics, but you switched on whichever genetics. It may be that even if that donor had that embryo as her own biological child, they would have turned out even more different than they are now. You raise them, and the way that they interact with their environment and just the way that you are with them, I think makes them who they are. And I think I can't even think where I read it. I'm sure I was doom scrolling today or something, and there was someone talking about like it's quite dangerous when people want to like create mini me's, you know, like and actually you can't, like you can and you can't, like, and actually trying to do that is actually says more about that person than it says a lot about that person. But you do just want them to be their own little people, and yeah, I think the resemblance thing fades away after a while. I just don't think people. Yeah. And I think more and more so, actually, more and more so as conversations like this are happening, where things are much more in like the mainstream consciousness of like people just won't say that stuff because you know, because they know it's not correct. It's like, you know, how we
it's going to take
about
time.
race, how we talk about blah blah blah, you know, it will take time, but like ultimately if you think like how little, or babies that haven't even been born yet, you know, that was always what I took loads of comfort. Sorry, Becky, I'm going on a tangent now. Took really loads of comfort from was that the situation is only going to get better, like in terms of information and acceptance, even though there's nothing really to accept because it's normal, and you know, but there is still a bit of a taboo around it, and it would be naive not to acknowledge that. But I just think, oh my God, by the time Freddie's in like secondary school, like this is just not even going to be a conversation. And actually, you know, even at nursery, started a new nursery this year, there aren't donor baby, but I've like literally, me with my fertility Tourette's, like I've met like 4 other people that have done IVF, and like I knew it instantly that they had, even without them saying it. It wasn't because it was very noticeable or, you know, they had twins or something. It was just, I just knew they had.
And it's like radar, isn't it?
It is. Well, just talking about kind of speaking and being open, we've had a question here around, have any of you, or do you have any examples of families who have kept the donation just between the couple and the child? So I understand the benefits of talking with the child early, and I'm very open to that, but I'm conflicted with how open to be with family and friends, at least now, for the next few years, when it currently feels very private between me and my husband. And I think this is a really tricky subject, because I think it's different for everyone in terms of there is a line between secrecy and privacy. And I think everybody is entitled to that privacy. I think part of my own thinking around this has been thinking about, if I'm sharing something with my child that is really important about how they were made, and they were to then share that with somebody else who's close to them, who might be caring for them, and they don't know about it, I would maybe be worried a little bit about what that might look like to the child? So is there an element of shame around this? Why is it not being spoken about? And I'm not saying this that you should be telling the world, but it might be that a few trusted close people that you can confide in just gives you that space. And I think from my own experience and speaking to so many different people, I think often we're quite surprised at how well some people can take this. And I know it can feel quite daunting to speak to people, but there are different ways you can share. And there's a free resource through Paths to Parent Hub, which I might ask Apricity to share afterwards, that you can, there's a link and you can send it to your friends and family, and they can go through, they can learn more about what this path is and what it means to you and how they can support you. And I know, Keely, you shared your story with your husband on there, so they can learn a little bit about it and actually why talking to the child is so important. And so I think that was just some of my kind of initial kind of feelings around this. And it wasn't that I was hugely open with everyone straight away. It's been over time, and I've spoken to more people, and obviously nobody needs to be as open as I am and on Instagram now, but I think it is an individual choice. But I think it's maybe just projecting yourself forward a little bit and thinking about, okay, what are those scenarios where maybe your child might say something, and what reaction might they get if they don't know? Keely, what have you thought around this? I know you're quite an open book anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I've shared right from the beginning, both to the world and to my family. Obviously, I told them first, but I think it also sort of depends on your it does depend on your family dynamic. Like, we have a very close family. We all live like 2 miles away from each other. I think that it's that thing you said, Becky, where it's a really important part of who they are. And it's not the be all and end all, but it is part of who they are. And I think that relationship between you and your child, of like being open and them feeling that they can trust you, and then for them to, if you didn't tell them, or if you didn't tell family and friends, that whole shame thing of like when they're a bit older and they do understand, actually they kind of are able to rationalize it more, then I feel like it's like, this is just a personal point of view, I feel like that would be a bit of like a betrayal. It's like, well, why didn't you tell them? Like, why? What's so wrong about it? Why did you feel like that? And I know that it can be super complicated depending on your own situation and how you have with family members and whatever. But I think it is that thing of being really surprising. Like, Sam mentioned earlier, I'll be really short, I promise. Sam mentioned earlier about like her family being really like, like a strong kind of genetic strain. Like my family are exactly the same. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, my brother and I really look at each other. In fact, my niece and nephew people think are like my kids sometimes. Like, and it was always like, oh my God, oh no, that's going to be lost, or that's going to be. And my dad was a similar thing. I think my dad's got an old East End, classic, just doesn't really know much about anything. He won't mind me saying that. And when I say, like, it was really hard for him to get his head around fertility treatment to start with. Like, the process of IVF was really complicated. And then to go to egg donor, I was like, oh God, he's not going to get it. It's like, but one thing he said to John, we were on holiday before this had even happened, and he took John out for a beer, and he just said, I know you're really struggling, and I know you're making some choices at the moment. I mean, I can't believe my dad was so eloquent, but and he just said, I just want you to know that whatever happens, we will love your child as much as we love our other grandchildren, and we will never see them in any other way. And John came back and told me about this, and I was like, my dad said that? Like, what? Like, he's a really soppy guy, but like, for him to recognize that and know that. And I think actually, particularly older generation can really surprise you. Like, so I think it's just good to get it out there.
It is. I think it is. I'm just conscious we've got lots and lots of questions that are coming through, and I hate leaving questions unanswered, so I might going to do a little bit of a as much as I can, a quick fire. So Sam, when did you tell people that you use donor eggs? Two of you mentioned that your children know. What about other people did you have any bad reactions? So kind of picking up on the same theme, what reactions have you had?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting one that actually for us. So, and I've talked about this quite a lot on my blogs on Rain to Rainbow from my Instagram page about so very similar to Keely, like kind of close circle that, you know, and everybody kind of knew what we were going through. And that was mainly because we felt like we needed to share, because probably our behaviours during that time was quite obvious to people that something was going on. So we, you know, and we're lucky that we have a really close, you know, what I like to call our psychological safety kind of like circle of people that you feel like you can tell anything to, and they really do support you. But yeah, in a wider circle, we did have a couple of people that were not necessarily negative or like had like an adverse, but I think it was just generally like shock, and I think yeah, and I think
curious.
almost curious and
Mm.
almost kind of like, well, what's that then? And that it was more that reaction, and that I
Mm.
think is part of what the reason that kind of helped to spur me on a little bit to talk more about it. I hadn't planned to openly talk very much like about like the egg donation process for us, and that's what we'd gone through as much as I had with my IVF kind of journey. But I think for me now, actually coming out the other side of it is something I'm very proud of, and therefore that's something I feel like it should be talked about more. So yeah, and I think because I got some of those reactions, I felt like actually it was almost a little bit of my duty to kind of educate people that don't know about this, and it should be all talked about. So and that's partly where mine came from, I think.
Yeah, and I think your story sharing, and Keely shared her story, I've shared my story. Feel free to use our stories as a way to offer up something to them without you having to give all the answers. Like, go and have a look at this Instagram page, go and have a look at this blog, because, or this friends and family resource, because it shouldn't need to be you all the time educating them. You can tell them, you can say, look, it's a really difficult thing for me to talk about, but here's some things you can go and read, some things you can go and watch. And it can be really, really helpful. So thank you, Sam. We've had a comment from someone who's just said, thank you so much. I teared up at my 4-year-old nephew's swim class tonight, thinking I'd never know this myself, and this has helped immensely. I still tear up when the girls are swimming and they do something amazing. And Lena did something in the pool the other day and she managed to swim all the way across. And I was cheering away and she kind of just did a bow in the pool. And I just thought, that's my girl. And I would have also thought, I'll never know this, but you absolutely can. And I always use a phrase that you may not conceive in the way that you imagined, but you can still parent in the way that you've always imagined. And you can, those moments that you've imagined are still there. They're still possible.
We're
It's
all
just a different
three.
path.
Yeah, and I was just
Sorry,
sorry
Sam.
to talk over. I was just going to say we're three kind of living proof examples of that, right? You know, we've all had that. We've all thought that that would never be us, and now we're all sat here and we all have our own children, right? And we all live through those moments. So yeah, absolutely. I kind of really hope that that's the one thing that a lot of people take away from tonight, is that actually it gives people that kind of like, you know, if you're at that point where you feel like the fight's gone and you kind of you at the point of giving up, don't, because actually just kind of keep going and just find that resilience from somewhere and keep going, because there really is kind of, there's so much kind of hope that I want people to take from it, and actually that's part of the reason why I think like all three of us probably share our story, is to kind of give people that actually it is possible. You know, the art of what feels like is impossible actually is possible. So yeah, that's the key bit. So,
And I think you're not on your own as well. And what I want to do is just, we haven't got any time for any more questions, but I'm just going to do a bit of signposting on some of the questions because there is information out there. I mean, you can't do this topic justice in 45 minutes. Someone mentioned something about epigenetics, and I think that's an amazing concept to understand more about. There is an amazing webinar with Dr. Helen O'Neill on Paths to Parenthood, which is my membership platform. And that really gets you to think about actually how in carrying the baby, you influence the expression of the genes, and although you're not changing their genetic makeup, you do have an influence. So I think that is a real interesting topic to look at. There's a couple of people that have asked about using a donor for having a second child or a sibling, and this is really interesting because I get this question so much on my Instagram, and I think everyone who asks it feels like they're the only ones where they've had a child with using their own genetics and then are struggling to conceive a sibling, and do you know anyone else? And again, in Paths to Parenthood, there is a space for blended and mixed families, and you can hear from other people who've been down that route. And although there'll be a lot of similarities in what we've been talking about tonight, there are different questions and different fears that you might have, and And actually, it's about how do you weave in two different family stories to make one bigger family story. So there are resources out there. There's lots of children's books that can be more personalized now for those types of situations as well. And I'm trying to think of a couple of people on Instagram, Keely. I don't know whether you know off the top of your head. I know there's Shima at 1 in 7.
Shima, yeah, Shima's
isn't
a great, yeah, 1 in 7. Shima's a great example, actually.
Yeah.
And yeah, for all sorts of reasons.
I think she's incredible, but I think her story's slightly the other way around, that she went through donor and then she conceived naturally afterwards. But again, she's still having to think through those different scenarios. So
Yeah.
hopefully that just helps you there in terms of putting
And
that
Sally.
forward. Yes, Sally as well. And I'm trying to remember her handle, but we'll try and find it.
Yeah.
To send out. So yeah, thank you so much. Just had another question. Is there a paths to parenthood for solo mums? Yes, there is some information around solo parenthood as well. I would also say check out The Stork and I if you haven't already. Mel is absolutely fantastic from a solo mum perspective. And Shima, that's exactly how you spell Shima, but her account is 1 in 7. I think it's got a little underscore between the words as well. But yeah, I feel like we've touched on so many different topics tonight, and we could probably keep going for another 3 hours. But I know that people will want to have the rest of their evening. And I just want to say a huge thank you, Keely and Sam, for sharing your stories, because I mean, you've just seen in those comments, it really helps just for people to hear from other people and to have that space, I think, to express those feelings. So thank you, and hand back over to Holly.
Thank you so much, Becky. Thank you, Keely. Thank you, Sam, for sharing. We're really grateful to you for coming on here tonight. And as Becky says, she's got lots of great resources on Path to Parent Hub. And also, I'm not sure if we didn't mention it earlier, but everyone who joins with Apricity does actually get 6 months free access to Path to Parent Hub. So we definitely see the value in your fantastic community. And thank you so much, everyone. We will be sending this recording around later this week, so keep an eye out. We'll send it to everyone who registered or not, so please feel free to share with anyone that you think might benefit from it as well.
Yeah, and do reach out if we've missed anything. Just send a quick message on Instagram. Absolutely. And yeah, we can follow up. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.